Hello all, I'm Basement Horrors, and welcome to my Halloween special. Prepare for scares, frights, and some of your favorite narrators to whisk you away in real-life tales of horror. Tonight's a big night in our community, so thank you for stopping by. I guarantee you will not regret it. Let's start our night of terror off together with Jack's nightmares. Jack, take it away.
Hi. I have always held off on telling this story because of personal reasons, but I think it would be better if I just got this off my shoulders once and for all. So, this all started back in 2012, and I just turned 13 and wanted to go out with my older friends, who really weren't all that older than me to begin with. But anyways, I had finally convinced my parents to let me go trick-or-treating with my friends, and man was I so excited. And raced to the richer part of our neighborhood, because that's where all the good stuff was. Like the jumbo candy bars, homemade cookies and brownies, and more. But after hitting the jackpot at some old man's house, who was so kind enough to give me the rest of what he had in his jar, me and my friends got bored, and did not want to go back home so early, since we had only been out for about 30 minutes. So we continued to walk around the neighborhood, exploring, and having fun scaring people, jumping in and out of bushes, until one of my friends found an abandoned house with the front door open. Now, since we are in Michigan, it's not a big deal to find an abandoned house. Then one of my friends, well, we'll just call him Mac for now, decided that it would be a great idea to go inside the house and scare people as they walk by. Now, me being just as stupid as everyone else, I thought it was a great idea. So we went inside the house. Right away, you got that feeling that you're in trouble. But me being 13, I brushed it off and continued walking around the house until one of my friends came running past me. I'd never seen him run that fast in my life, I thought. As I turned to see what he was running from, I see this huge fat guy with ripped clothing and a stained yellow shirt running at me. So I took off running in the other direction, out the back door, and made my way to the front of the house. To see if anyone else got out. I looked around the corner to see all three of my friends hauling it down the street. So I took off after them to meet up. And they told me the man must have been a squatter or something like that, or a homeless guy. Now after that, we all just spent the night at my house because it was the closest. And yeah, I'm sure you're wondering why we didn't call the cops or tell our parents. That's because we knew if we did, we wouldn't be allowed to go out next year.
Thank you, Jack. Now we will move on to one of my first and closest friends here on YouTube, Truth is Scarier Than Fiction. Following him will be the one and only Mortis Media, and then it will be Ghastly Ghoul's turn to tell us a tale.
I was around 2 at the time the story occurred. My mother, father, and I lived in a nice house in a shadier part of the neighborhood. We had a former felon living across the street, and she used to come out of her house and yell at you if you were walking on the sidewalk in front of her house or even near her house. The neighborhood was so bad that I couldn't go outside at night for Halloween. But little did I know at that time, there was also a drug dealer living across the street. The police knew about him, however, they were waiting to bust him for whatever reason. It might have been lack of evidence or lack of a warrant. It was about 3 o'clock at night when my mother heard banging on the door. My father was at his job, so he wasn't there, and my mother was home alone with me. She went to see who was at the front door. She looked through the window and saw 3 large men standing there, She didn't have a cell phone, and the one phone in the house had to be charged. Sadly, I knocked it over, so the phone didn't have a charge. She had to crawl past the door to get to the charger so the men didn't see her. Once she got the charger, she charged the phone and called the police. The police said that they were probably just at the wrong house and they would eventually go away. The city was busy at night, so they couldn't spare any officers. The men eventually went away and we moved a few years later. This is the reason we still have a shotgun in our home. I believe the man next door was eventually busted on drug charges. However, he didn't have enough drugs on him for the police to convict him of possession with the intent to sell. I'm glad we moved away.
I was just playing on my phone when I was around the age of 7, as I usually did on a weekend. My parents were out in the garden, doing some work as my cousins were coming over. I was getting thirsty, as I had been on that screen for about 2 hours straight, so I put my phone down on the couch and went outside to see how the gardening was going. But the door was locked, and there was no one outside. The garden, however, well, it hadn't been touched, although there was a noise coming from the garage. Everything felt pretty weird. I went outside from the front and went around the front of the garage. There was still no one in there, but everything was ruined. I was getting seriously creeped out, so casually I went back to the front of the garage. So I casually went back to the place I was sitting with my phone. And as I arrived, my phone had been smashed. The screen. Who would smash my screen? I was about to call my mother, but I was so terrified at what was going on that I screamed as loud as I could and ran out the house and down the street. I knocked furiously on my friend's door. They answered it and they just looked at me confused. They told me I should go. I went back slowly to my house to see my parents arguing over something. I didn't know what it was, and when they saw me, their faces went ghostly white. They shouted at me to get inside and get back on my phone, which I thought was a bit weird, but I did it anyway. It had been probably 2 minutes, and I got a tap on my shoulder and quickly turned to see who it was, and there was no one there. I just breathed heavily and carried on. About 15 minutes later, I hear a sudden scream. It was a woman. My parents had heard it too, and I went outside after unlocking the door with a key. There was someone in the garden, just facing the bush near the door, and she was crying. I rushed over to the only exit of the house and ran to where my parents were. They were still arguing, and I screamed at them to stop and to listen to me. I told them what had happened, and my dad said in a calm voice, "We're moving house, sweetie. Get into the car." And my mum just stumbled into the car. I looked at the house and saw the same person who was crying standing in front of the door, watching us. I didn't tell my parents because they had had enough already, and ever since then I've always been aware to check every so often where my parents are. I know everything I've said sounds extremely strange, but that is exactly how it happened to me. I still to this day have absolutely no idea what went on, but the point is, I'm happy in our new house now, and I'll never forget that last day we spent there.
When I was younger, I talked a couple of friends to go to a graveyard on Halloween. I enticed them with the line of, "Why do you think cemeteries have walls around them?" Then, the whole theory of the barriers between planes being weaker. Anyway, we went in, trying not to be disrespectful, because I hate that. We walked past a statue of an angel, which is near the side entrance we used, and went on into the main area. We figured that the newer area would be most active, so we went and sat on a commemorative bench and just waited. We heard a couple of voices, and my friend said he saw a shadow, but generally it was what was intended, peaceful. I did pick up a couple of spirits lingering around, but they weren't what I call extroverts. As we left about a half an hour later, and one of my friends was down to his last fingernail, the weird stuff happened. The first thing I noticed was that there was something about the statue that was off. We got closer to it. Then my friend stopped dead and started panicking. He noticed what was off about the statue. It had turned its head to look at us, rather than its normal position looking towards the gate. This was impossible as it's a marble statue. I obviously just thought someone was playing a joke on us, because I felt no presence, and generally everywhere apart from my friend felt calm. So I kept on walking, thinking that there were kids outside, or we got the positioning of the statue wrong. I was the last through the gate because I was the least scared, and as I turned to look in and close the gate, I looked over at the angel, and it was looking back towards the gate. Then, as I walked back towards the car, I felt what was a small presence, and a hand pushing me towards the car and away from the graveyard. When I got home, I asked my mom about the statue, and she told me that when she was younger, she used to walk through the graveyard on the way back from school, and she felt she was being watched as she walked past. Since then, I've asked around, and generally a lot of people felt the same way. Unfortunately, the angel was vandalized a couple years ago and had to be taken down.
Thanks, friends. Now, Clown Smirk will tell us about a true tragedy that occurred on Halloween. After him, Killer Orange Cat will spook you with a tale about a flying ball of light. And then, the Devil's Interval will stop by to chill your bones.
One of the most horrific scenes to happen on Halloween took place in Napa, California in 2004. Housemates Adrian, Leslie, and Lauren spent the whole entire Halloween handing out candy to trick-or-treaters. After going to bed, Lauren woke up to the sounds of Adrian screaming at 2 a.m. She quickly ran outside in horror, but after hearing the screams again, she ran back inside. She then discovered both of her friends had been stabbed and were barely alive. She again ran outside the house and called 911. Her friends had later died. The killer was Adrian's best friend fiancé, Eric Couple, who committed the murders just because he was jealous of the friendship between Adrian and his girlfriend.
The play. I was in the drama club in high school. We didn't have a stage. Instead, all of our plays were performed in a small arena. It was an odd little place, but the uniqueness of it has made for some interesting memories. Well, when I was 16, I was cast in my first play. It was Harvey, and I played a psychiatrist. My friend Nick, who was actually a decent actor, failed to get a part in the play. He did, however, do the lighting for the play, and he was usually the very last person to leave the arena at night. The play was taking place in October, so it got dark rather quickly. About a week before opening night, Nick and I stayed in the arena rather late talking. Before we knew it, it was past 7 p.m., and the school had been closed for over 4 hours. It had been dark for about 3. And I told Nick that I needed to get going or I would miss dinner. Nick then told me that something had happened about 3 nights ago that I might find interesting. He said that the arena had a theater ghost. He had been closing the arena down, and while he had been turning off the lights, he turned and saw a man standing across the arena looking at him. Knowing that I had a strong interest in the supernatural, Nick asked me if I wanted him to show me what he was doing when the ghost appeared. My first thought was that Nick was going to play a joke on me. I figured he would tell me a story and then grab me and scream or something. If he did, I couldn't blame him though. I would do that myself. There were 6 columns in the arena, and there was a light switch on each column. He told me when he had turned off the sixth light was when he saw the man standing across from him. So I followed Nick as he recreated his previous night. He turned off the first light and indicated I should follow him. We walked over to the second column, and he switched the light off. Then slowly, we both made our way over to the third column. By this point, I was completely expecting Nick to grab me. I didn't think he would wait until the last light because that would seem too obvious. But I followed him to the fourth light, and he switched it off. We walked to the fifth light, and switched it off. As we made our way to the last column, I braced myself because I knew it was going to happen. We slowly walked up to the column, and I was tense because I was forcing myself not to jump when Nick would scare me. The moment Nick turned off the last light, across from us in the arena, I saw this yellow light rise out of the middle of the air, hit the ceiling, and quickly skim the ceiling and disappear. This all happened in about 3 seconds. I blinked, unsure of what had just happened. Nick looked at me and asked me what was wrong. I just told him, "You're starting to make me see things." Nick then asked, "Did you see the strange ball of light fly up to the ceiling and move across it?" I didn't know what to think, but the scariest thing was that I had not told Nick what I had seen, but he described it perfectly. The ball itself was not very scary, but knowing that whatever it was, whatever it could be, that there was something in the arena with us, and the lights were all turned out. And whatever it wasn't natural. Well, I quickly made my way out of the arena and had to then walk home in the dark. I can't explain why it was scary, but I was very afraid as I walked home in the dark by myself. I kept expecting whatever it was that we saw to appear in the dark and get me. I never felt comfortable in that arena ever again.
This happened back in 2014. I went out on Halloween during my first year of university. I was wearing high-heeled boots and a leather jacket. Over the course of the night, drunk me had taken them off and left them at our group's table due to being uncomfortable. By the end of the night, I'd practically danced my way to near sobriety, and I went to my group's table. However, they'd given up the table, and my boots and jacket were nowhere to be seen. Someone had stolen them. Whatever, they weren't expensive, and I rarely wore them anyway. But I had to walk the 15 minutes back to my accommodation. I didn't have money for a taxi, so I thought I'd just walk slowly. I asked one guy, the asshole in the group that everyone hated, if he could just keep me company because he was tall. He laughed, said no, and walked off. So I was walking alone, shoeless, in a busy city center, watching out for broken glass or anything else that was harmful or disgusting. I was halfway to my place when I was stopped by a Middle Eastern man. The city was very culturally diverse. He asked if I was okay, and I was grateful someone cared enough to make sure I was all right. He offered to walk with me, so I accepted. He was very kind and told me his name was Omar. He started saying how beautiful he thought I was, and how lucky he was to have found me, which unsettled me slightly. Once I was around the corner from my place, I thanked Omar, and said I'd walk the rest of the way on my own. He instantly looked offended. "Don't you want to invite me in for a cup of tea to thank me?" I told him no, because I don't know him. He kept hold of my wrist. "Well, can I have a kiss for helping you?" Again, I declined, and his grip tightened. Well, do I get a hug for being your friend? By this point, I just wanted him to let go, so I gingerly gave him a hug. He then grabbed me and tried to kiss me, but I pressed my lips together, and instead he just licked up my face. I finally get free and start walking away. He follows me. I speed up, and so does he. I abandon my watch for glass on the ground crap and begin sprinting, now terrified as I hear him running too. I get my phone out and call my friend Rob, who I beg to help me. He agrees and gets to my flat not long after I do, with a knife, in case Omar was still there. He wasn't. I told the people in my group, and they were mortified they left me alone. I returned home for a week, because I was thoroughly shook up. Now, on a night out, I make sure everyone is close by, so it doesn't happen again. So, Omar, let's not meet again.
Thank you for sharing stories. This has been quite the nice Halloween so far, if I say so myself. Now, get out of here, eat some candy, watch some scary movies, and keep your doors and windows locked. This has been Basement Horrors. Happy Halloween, and as always, have a horrific day.